The fines didn't start big, they started small. $75 for a trash bin left out too long, $120 for edging that wasn't uniform, $50 for a mailbox flag that disrupted visual symmetry. Individually, they felt annoying. Collectively, they felt intentional. Because the notices always arrived right after meetings where someone disagreed with Karen. And if you watched closely, it was always the same pattern. Speak up, get fined. At first, most people paid, not because they agreed, but because it was easier. Karen liked to say compliance keeps the neighborhood strong, but compliance was becoming revenue. Every month at the board meeting, she highlighted enforcement totals like achievements. Collections are up 32%. She smiled when she said it, like growth was the goal, not harmony. One night, a resident asked a simple question: where does the fine money go? Karen answered quickly: operating expenses. But the financial summary didn't break it down. No separate enforcement category, no transparent reporting, just a swelling line item under discretionary spending. That's when someone started requesting detailed statements. The numbers told a different story. Legal consultations increased, administrative stipends increased, board operational allowances increased, but landscaping contracts, unchanged. Security improvements, delayed. Community projects, postponed. The fines weren't protecting the neighborhood, they were protecting influence. And once residents noticed the pattern, the fear shifted. Because power doesn't thrive on rules, it thrives on silence. Karen wasn't just enforcing bylaws, she was building leverage, and leverage funded her authority. The real question wasn't whether the fines were justified, it was whether they were strategic. The records didn't come easily. 3 years of financial statements required a formal written request, then a follow-up, then a reminder citing the bylaws. Karen stalled. Accounting is compiling the data. Some archives are off-site. Transparency takes time. But once the packet finally arrived, it was thicker than expected and heavier, not because of paper, because of what it suggested. The enforcement revenue line had tripled in 24 months. Tripled. But maintenance costs remained flat. Reserve contributions barely moved. Instead, a new category appeared midway through year 2: administrative advisory services. No vendor breakdown, no service description, just recurring monthly payments. Approved unanimously by the board, chaired by Karen. Then someone noticed something smaller: reimbursements, mileage claims for community inspections, printing expenses, meeting hospitality budgets that climbed steadily. It wasn't extravagant, it was incremental. But incremental growth hides better than dramatic spike, especially when residents are only shown summaries. A retired accountant in the neighborhood ran the numbers independently. Total fines collected over 3 years, $187,400. Total spent on visible neighborhood improvements from that revenue, less than $30,000. The rest, administrative expansion, consultation retainers, operational adjustments. Language that sounded responsible, but read like insulation. The pattern wasn't emotional anymore. It was mathematical. Enforcement increased when budgets tightened, inspections increased after residents questioned leadership, and fines peaked right before annual board reviews. Power wasn't just maintained, it was financed. And now the residents weren't asking if Karen liked control. They were asking if control had become profitable. It started with a name search. Administrative Advisory Services wasn't a large firm. It wasn't even regional. It was an LLC registered 2 years ago. The same year enforcement revenue tripled. The mailing address? A residential property. Not an office park, not a suite, a house. 3 streets over. Registration documents were public, and buried in the filing details was a managing member. Last name, Whitmore. Karen's last name, different first name, same address as her brother's property. The payments weren't random. They were routed, monthly, consistent, quiet. At the next meeting, the question was asked carefully: can you clarify the ownership structure of Administrative Advisory Services? Karen didn't hesitate. It's an independent compliance consultant. But when asked directly whether she had any personal relationship with the vendor, she shifted. That's irrelevant to operational efficiency. It wasn't irrelevant, it was the point. The retired accountant spoke next. Calm, measured. Over $92,000 paid to that entity in 18 months. The room changed, because this wasn't about strict enforcement anymore. This was about a financial relationship tied to enforcement. Fines increased, vendor payments increased, inspections intensified, revenue flowed, outwardly compliant, internally circular. Karen called the meeting adjourned early. No vote, no explanation, just procedural retreat. But the silence felt different now. Residents weren't intimidated. They were aligned because power trips collapse when profit enters the conversation. The formal complaint wasn't emotional, it was documented. Three residents filed it together with the State Oversight Office and the HOA's legal counsel. Attached were financial summaries, vendor payments, inspection escalation records, and the business registration tying administrative advisory services to Karen's family address. No accusations, just facts. But facts, when organized properly, are louder than outrage. Within 2 weeks, the HOA received notice of an external compliance review. And for the first time since Karen became president of BET, the investigation wasn't happening inside the neighborhood. The auditors requested everything: vendor contracts, board approval records, inspection reports, fine escalation logs, payment authorizations. When the financial trail was reconstructed, the pattern became clear. As fines increased, payments to the consulting firm increased. Inspection frequency also increased. Revenue moved in a loop. Residents, fines, HOA account, vendor payments. And the vendor? A company tied to Karen's immediate family. At the emergency meeting, the atmosphere was different. No debates, no raised voices, just the auditor's statement. Failure to disclose related party financial relationships while approving vendor payments constitutes a serious governance violation. The board didn't deliberate long. Karen was removed as president immediately, vendor contracts were terminated, and the HOA formally referred the findings for further review. For the first time in 2 years, no new fines were issued. The results came months later. Karen wasn't just removed, she was barred from serving on the HOA board again. The consulting contract was voided. Funds paid to the company were partially recovered through settlement, and the bylaws were rewritten. Vendor relationships now required full conflict of interest disclosure. Independent financial audits became mandatory every year, because governance only works when transparency is stronger than authority. Karen thought fines gave her power. Instead, they created a paper trail. The neighborhood didn't celebrate, it simply stabilized. Inspections became predictable. Fines became rare. Rules became clear again. Because enforcement works best when it's boring, not profitable. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever seen someone in leadership quietly turn rules into a personal power system? Maybe in an HOA, a workplace, or even a local community. Share your experience in the comments. Your story might help someone else recognize the warning signs earlier. And if you enjoy these HOA stories exposing how power really works, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Because silence protects abuse. But documentation ends it.